Hey everyone, RogueGold here, welcome back to the Division 2. And today, I wanted to have a conversation on a topic that I've been contemplating for quite a little while now. It's about Seasons 2.0, right, the newer update and game model that we've adopted, and specifically how it relates to some of the corners and content within the game that I feel as though has been somewhat left behind or forgotten. And by the end of this, I want to propose a potential path forward to bring all of these things together. Really, I just need to dive in to start making sense of this all. You know the drill. If you want to see more Division 2 updates and videos from me, then hit that subscribe button. Additionally, shout out and thank you to our channel members for your continued support. It allows me to continue making videos like these and ranting on the internet, so thank you so much. But without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so as I mentioned, a lot of this revolves around Seasons 2.0, and more specifically, how I feel as though it has largely left global events, which is a Division 1 and franchise staple, in the dust. Now again, I've had these thoughts for a little while, but it all came to the forefront this past week while the reanimated event has been live, specifically because a member of our Discord server at a fake username posted that they had found a way to enable reanimated while within Legacy Manhunt Climax missions, meaning they also had modifiers like Point Blank or Rogue Momentum active. This is one of the photos they sent proving it. I know it's pretty grainy, but trust me, there was also a video proving this did happen. I went in and tried myself, couldn't get it to work. I'm sure there's some kind of weird sequence you have to do to get it to happen. But this is all notable because according to the devs, this was supposedly not intended to be possible. If we look back at the Seasons 2 FAQ that we got back in June 2024, there was a question asked saying, will seasonal characters, which we didn't obviously end up getting, but the same idea applies here, will they have access to global events? And the answer is that global events as they are right now will remain exclusive to non-seasonal characters due to their incompatibility with seasonal progression and modifiers in their current state. They will adhere to the established rotation model already present in the game. Seasonal characters may eventually receive their own version of global events tailored to enhance the seasonal experience, but this implementation will occur at a later time. And so again, even though we didn't actually end up getting seasonal characters, the same thing pretty much happened where if you're running with modifiers, if you're playing the season content, you cannot then pair that with global events. You have to manually go and deactivate modifiers and activate global events within the seasonal timeline. That said, despite them saying that these things were not meant to mesh, it doesn't shock me that it is still technically possible to do. I think that the main reasons that they decoupled global events and modifiers came down to two things. For one, there's the power aspect, right? Modifiers and global events serve similar purposes in giving the player a bunch of new power, and so doubling those things up at will would be a very strong way to play pretty much any of the game's content. And then the second part of that is the readability and comprehension of it all. I'm sure veteran players would have no trouble navigating those two things at once, but for newer players that already struggle with understanding the different systems and UI in the game, trying to mix stuff like modifiers alongside global event play, if, hostiles suddenly have 3 different markers above their heads and all this different stuff, I could definitely see that getting pretty confusing. But regardless of what the reasons are that they decoupled the two, ever since Seasons 2.0 began, global events have not quite felt the same. At least to me. I'm somebody who has always enjoyed global events more so for the gameplay changes compared to the rewards. The thing is though that I now get that same satisfaction and power fantasy from seasonal modifiers which are active all of the time. And so this all led me to thinking, is there a way in which we could revitalize global events, let them mesh better with everything else that Seasons 2.0 tries to do, and at the end of the day, no longer make it an either-or situation when it comes to pairing them with seasonal modifiers? So I want to make very clear, what I'm going to pitch here, not everybody is going to be a fan of. I know the global events have some die-hard supporters, other people play them because they don't enjoy seasonal modifiers. That's all well and good. I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes here. I do feel as though that at this point, especially after Rogue Momentum revitalized interest in modifiers with power values and the lessened oppression of hostile mods, I think there are more people who use and lean into the power of modifiers compared to those who don't, at least when you're considering like active players or people who engage in the seasonal content. That said, as always, my opinion is not the right opinion, it's just mine. I would love to hear your own ideas and counterpoints after you've heard mine down in the comments below. But getting to it, in thinking of how to potentially revitalize global events, it made me think of another topic I was yapping about lately. Some of you may have seen this over on Twitter, where I posted about how I miss the prominence of incursions in endgame Division content, especially with how good I think Paradise Lost is in the Division 2. I said this: it deeply saddens me that incursions don't have the same endgame prominence and incentive to clear weekly as they did in the Division 1. Paradise Lost is such a fun piece of content. I miss that feeling of randomly queuing up for an incursion and battling through it with unknown agents. So just to briefly expand on that, I really do think that it is unfortunate how inconsequential Paradise Lost has become since its release, because even though much like a legendary mission via the weekly project, it does give you a guaranteed exotic once a week from the final chest, the thing is that in modern day Division 2 endgame, that's really not all that great of an incentive. I can do 2 countdown runs and have enough tokens to buy an exotic cache. I could play 1 game of Conflict and have a decent chance of pulling an exotic from one of those caches. Just as a side point, bare minimum, it would be nice to get a weekly incursion project or something to see them buff up that final chest a little bit to make the content itself more valuable to play. But I digress. After doing some thinking, having all of these topics in mind, I came to a realization. What if there is one solution that could then go and solve all of these problems? So, to begin explaining that, does anybody recall how global events functioned back in the Division 1? Specifically, they necessitated efficient farming of select pieces of content to really maximize your yield of the global event currency, and you then use that to buy lucrative rewards. And so personally, while I've always thought the Division 2's global event rewards are nice, I've really missed that grind and efficiency aspect of the old days, especially like early global events. If you remember like 1.7, it really catered to your position on the leaderboard of that per hour yield. And so this all made me wonder, what if we tried to apply that same idea here in the Division 2, where instead of choosing between using modifiers or global events, what if global events turned into a week-long event that applied a unique gameplay mechanic or layer to a curated selection of content? As far as what that curated selection would be, maybe it would be 1 to 2 of the open world zones, 2 to 3 main missions, 1 of the game modes that we have, and an incursion, in this case Paradise Lost. And so that for that week, if you went and played that given content, that gameplay layer is then always active, and you earn global event currency by completing or participating. In this case, we could just keep stars, that's fine. But already, I feel as though this would really help spotlight certain pieces of content, like the incursion, while still hopefully offering enough options to not make things too repetitive. And by focusing in what it's asking you to play, I feel as though hopefully that would bring back some of the rush and intensity of that old school global event farming. I feel like that would be really fun. But as far as for how the global event mechanics themselves could be changed to mesh with our seasonal modifiers a bit better, that's a bit more tricky. I do have one idea, though again, it may be unpopular to some, and that's okay. But out of the 6 global events that we have in the Division 2 right now, I try and think about which ones can be reduced to a very basic, simple gameplay mechanic that could then easily work on top of the seasonal mods that we have right now. And in my mind, that came down to Reanimated and Hollywood. Reanimated, when you boil it down, focuses on headshot kills, much the same as the Outbreak event did back in the Division 1. On top of that, though, it then of course has the reanimation part of it, all of the different stuff. So let's say if you were to rework this just to make it a little bit simpler, under this theoretical new system, while the mechanic or global event is active, whatever it may be renamed to, let's say that body shots deal 40% reduced damage, headshots deal 40% increased damage, and headshot kills then create the same corrosive explosion, dealing damage over time to enemies and healing allies. In my mind, that would keep things pretty simple and clear cut. There's no like special types of enemies, you just get headshots and you do good. In theory, that should layer just fine on top of the modifiers that we have already, and I can imagine trying to speedrun content like Paradise Lost to maximize that currency yield would be quite fun, popping heads and spreading that corrosive damage on fights like the tanker defense or right. On the other hand, you then have Hollywood, that I mentioned before. That event really boils down to enemies having a shield on them. You can break that shield via EMPs, explosives, and spec weapon damage, and doing so then creates that kind of chain explosion effect. That one I feel like could mostly stay as it is. Maybe your base damage is reduced by something like 60 to 70% while an enemy's shield is active, and then using one of those same 3 damage types would break the shield, creating that chain explosion. Imagine running an incursion or any kind of content tied to the GE where a full squad is running like tip of the spear to generate different kinds of spec ammo. Of course, you wouldn't probably actually need that, but that's the kind of fun that I foresee this change bringing. Flashy kills on curated content like the incursion, like other stuff for a week's long period to earn some extra rewards on top of what you get from the journey, priority objectives, or the seasonal modifier power itself. That's really what I'm brainstorming and pitching here. Would this take a decent amount of work and restructuring? Yeah, like I said, the remaining 4 global events would probably take a good bit more work to simplify or reformat. Maybe they would need some new replacements. But that's just one agent's idea on how to potentially revitalize and incorporate global events into the seasonal flow in such a way that doesn't make them an either-or situation, as well as to try and restore some of that good old farming week magic that global events had years ago. Is everybody going to like this idea? As I said before, I'm sure not, and I would love to hear your own thoughts and ideas down below. That is just about everything I have though, folks. I hope you enjoyed. Sometimes I get stuck on little topics like these and like to rant about them. Hopefully y'all don't mind these kinds of videos once in a while. As stated though, let me know all of your thoughts after watching through this. Would love to hear them. And also let me know any other topics that you think I should spin off into these little dedicated discussions. But that's all I've got. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, RogueGold out.